energy costs, there's a lot more interest now in electric vehicles.
Yeah, we regularly see electricity-powered rapid transit cars roll through Cleveland, but they were not the first mass transit moving on electricity. Here now, Leon Bibb with the story of 100-year-old electric streetcars wanting to run again.
Streetcars once clang, squeaked and rumbled crisscrossing Northeast Ohio. They followed steel rails laid out in the street. So ride with me, won't you? I'll do the driving on this one. Well, I'll drive for a little while. They are a long way from where they once ran, but these old trolley cars from Cleveland streets are getting shots of rejuvenation. A Medina County meadow in Seville marks the end of the track for some of these old Cleveland transit cars, resting and rusting in retirement, but reckoning to run again. Mechanics' hands, like those of surgeons, work to get cars' hearts pumping. This is not easy work.
I've helped lay the tracks, helped lay the ties, helped run the spiking machine that spikes the tracks.
This is the Northern Ohio Railway Museum in Seville, Medina County, Ohio. What transit companies put out to pasture trolley and streetcar-minded men, literally willing old steel, some of it hundreds years old, back to track-worthy status.
There's no comparison to sitting down and riding and going, this is what my grandparents rode on, or my parents, depending on what your age is.
Streetcars rumbled through Cleveland for generations. Guided by rails in the streets, they followed overhead lines feeding electricity for fuel. Cleveland in the 40s. Even then, some cars were mature, having clambered along rails for decades before that. Cleveland was a rail town.
You look at the pictures of downtown Cleveland and it's just, the streets are jammed, but they're trolleys, not cars.
Men probing the car's guts at the museum are mindful of the old days as they grunt through the grit of the car's age. Some remember streetcars squeaking streets, loaded with passengers.
I was about so big, we take the city bus to the end of the St. Clair line at Nottingham, ride the streetcars all the way downtown.
The motorman drove, conductors handled the door, and the money from paying passengers who hustled on and off.
And he could ring that bell, 2 bells, and that would tell the motorman, go ahead, go forward. If he had a passenger come up and say, I want to get off at the next stop, he'd ring that bell once.
It was a time of our ancestors. Very few personal cars decades ago, so Clevelanders grabbed their coats and got their hats, elbowing into the streetcar. If you had to go someplace, this is usually how you went. In the 1920s, Cleveland was a far larger city than it is today. Among the people who rode the streetcar were my great-uncles. They would put on their fashionable 1920s hats and they were off across town. They would try to find a seat on the streetcar. Usually they had to stand, but they were on their way to work, riding the streetcar. In your memory, can you hear that clanking sound?
Yeah.
And that ding-dinging of the bell?
It stops every 2 or 3 minutes, too. People get off, people get on.
Not just inside Cleveland and some suburbs, but also city to city. There were interurbans, electric cars running rails between larger communities.
You could go to Detroit, Toledo, you could go east to Buffalo on interurbans, you could go to Columbus.
The museum has some of the later years rapid transits no longer running the RTA routes. They too are in the rail bloodline. Here there are tours into the past. No visitors today, but had there been, you can imagine what they would have asked. What do they say when they see trolleys for the first time?
Who went on? What is it and how does it work?
My questions too. So Steve Heister escorted me to the cab of the rail crane car. It was, and still is, used for heavy lifting along the rail line. Steve helped me throttle her out.
There's an old song called Clang, Clang, Clang with the trolley and ding, ding, ding with the bell. I've always wanted to be a motorman. I guess I'm doing it now.
A My Ohio stop at the Northern Ohio Railway Museum, showing us the way we were, looking way back, down a long track. In those days, chug, chug, chug went the motor and bump, bump, bump with the brake. When the trolley riders made all their travels, each could feel the car shake. On our website, I will connect you to the Northern Ohio Railway Museum. For more information, for Live on 5, I'm your motorman, Leon Bibb.